Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I will show you how we can create a new appointment in Microsoft Bookings from PowerAutomate using Microsoft Graph APIs of Bookings. Now, this was a real world use case where we were building a solution for one of the customer where we created a Microsoft booking form which allows the end user to do the booking, and then the practitioners or the staff members of the organization would basically do a one-on-one meeting with the end user, which is participant in this case, and then during the session they take some session notes. So we were creating a CRM in PowerApps and PowerAutomate where the staff or the practitioner would be able to see all the bookings made against them, where they would be able to see each session and also enter the session notes against each of the session which are being conducted. Now, one of the feature which they wanted from the Power Apps was ability to create a new follow-up booking. Yes, we can do it from Microsoft Booking Form also, but they wanted to have a good experience for the practitioner so that while they are ending up or submitting the session notes, they can also create a follow-up appointment by taking the availability of the participant and do it from there itself. Now, what happened is when we were trying to explore it, initially we thought that yes, there would be a connector which would be available for Microsoft Booking through which we would be able to create a new appointment. But to our surprise, when we were checking, if you go to bookings, only there is one action which is available, which is list booking business. Okay, this action doesn't allow us to create any new appointment and list any appointments or anything else. Hence, we need to do a custom solution by calling the Microsoft Bookings Graph API from Power Apps and Power Automate. Now, another reason to create this video is that the Microsoft Appointment Bookings API which is available through which we would be able to book a new appointment, it is already available. So if you go to the documentation, you see that there are APIs which are available through which you would be able to make a post request to create a new bookings. But as per the documentation, we would basically, when you were going to send this particular JSON object by passing the dynamic values, we were facing some issues and the booking was not done. And that is what the trick I'm going to show you on how to do this in this video. So let's get started. Now, to understand the booking appointments API which is available, there are certain things which are very important because we need to make sure that we are passing IDs of certain things in the API. Like for example, the first one being the service ID. This is the service in the booking form. We will talk about it later. Another thing is we need to pass the staff member IDs. Now when I say staff member IDs, these are not the GUIDs or Azure intra ID of the user, but these are the separate unique ID which is available when you would set up the staff member in your Microsoft Booking form. And then of course there is customers and all that kind of other information which need to be passed. But because of this, it becomes little bit trickier on making the appointment API works when you are doing it from your custom solution which would be there. Okay, so first and foremost, let's do one thing, right? First thing is we will try things around Graph Explorers so that we understand what is important, what is not. Okay, now if you go through the documentation to basically make an API call to your shared booking page. So in my case, I have created this shared booking page test, which where basically I have one service, two services, consulting call with Siddharth and IT support. Now these are two services available. Now in consulting call with Siddharth, I have a staff member which is assigned, which is myself. And then if you go here, there are two staff members which are been assigned. Okay, so the booking form is set up as and when it is required. What we are going to do is we are going to create basically a booking appointment for consulting call with Siddharth by using our custom API call. Okay, so now first let's do one thing. This is how you need to find the unique ID of your shared booking page, and that would be an email address. So whenever you will create a new booking form, you will see that in your Microsoft Admin Center, there would be one user which would be created, which would be an unlicensed user based on the page name which you give and your domain name. Now, if I need to make an API call to just see that what this service page is, or what this service is about, what this booking form is about, you would be able to find and make the API calls. One thing important here is the permissions. So if you see here, we need bookings.read, at least for this part. I also have the other consent about booking read write all, because I tried Graph Explorer to basically create a new booking appointment, which is required for you to create a new booking appointments. Okay, now so that you understand, there are some parameters which we will need to basically get. One of them was, as I told you, would be the staff members, right? So there is an endpoint called staff members which you call, which is where from you would be able to get that unique ID of the staff member which is there. So in my case, this is my unique staff ID which is available. Okay, now same way, there are other endpoints which are there, which you might have to call based on your solution. In this case, if you want to get the customers, because the customer is already there in the system, you can make an query and you can get all the customers which are there in the current booking form. And then the other ones are custom questions which are there, services which is there. So services is going to give you all the services and the service ID which we are talking about, right? Which is also important, because when you are going to make an appointment, we cannot pass the service name, but rather we would have to pass the service ID. And hence we need to make sure that there is a table somewhere where we have this mapping based on which service appointment you wanted to book, to whom and for which staff member. All of these endpoints are important. I'm assuming that by using all of this, we would have a staff ID, you would have a service ID, which we wanted to basically use to make an appointment. Now let's go and try to make the API call, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a new PowerAutomate, which would be a custom triggered PowerAutomate. I will go here, and as I was telling you, there are no actions available for the bookings. There is only one action which is available, so we cannot use that. But in this case, we are going to make an HTTP request. So I'll say HTTP premium. Okay. We need to make a post API call. Yes. What we need to do is we need to go to the documentation and copy the endpoint, right? Which is basically solution/booking forms. So I'm going to go and use that. The first part of that would be graph.microsoft.com. So I will use that, and I need to replace the ID. So I'm going to use the shared booking page email ID as an ID. Okay. I'm just going to save it. We are going to add few other things, but I'm just going to save it for now. Okay, now comes the important part, right? Now, when you do it using Graph Explorer, you are going to make that API call using delegated permission, which is fine. But when you want to call it from the PowerAutomate, right? What we need to do is we need to pass some sort of authentication. And in this case, what we are going to do is we are going to basically use Active Directory OAuth, and we would need all these parameters, which is tenant ID, audience, client ID, and the credential type would be secret and the secret values. Now it means we are going to use application permissions of the GraphAPI for the bookings to make that API call. So now next step is to go and create a new Azure portal app registration. So I'm going to go to portal.azure, click on manage, click on click on app registration, and I will say new registration. I'll name it as test bookings API. Let it be single tenant. I wanted to just use it in my tenant. And then I'm going to come here, and first and foremost thing is I'm going to copy the client ID. So I'll use the client ID to pass the client ID here. Okay, next thing we need is tenant ID, which would be available. So I'll go here and copy the tenant ID. Right now you have audience. So in the audience case, what we need to do is we need to just say https://graph.microsoft.com, because we are going to use Graph API. Authority, you can keep it blank, and then we need to create the secret. So I will go back again here. I will go to client ID and secret, certificate and secret. I'll create new client secret. I'll give it a test name, and I'm going to say only 90 days for now. I will add it, and I'll copy the secret value and I'll paste it here. Okay, so kind of everything is done. Now the next thing would be the body object, which we will discuss in bit. But the another thing is that to make this API call, we need to give some permissions, right? So for that, what we will do is we will go to the API permissions in your app registration. You would say add, and then you would say graph, and then you would say application permissions, and then you would say bookings, right? Because what we need to do is we need to basically make the bookings appointment calls. Okay, wherein you can say booking, write booking information, and we also need this one because we are going to create a booking appointment. Now booking read write is basically to write or update anything in the booking information, but these are two mandatory, so we are going to add, I'm going to add manage all also, because we are going to manage all the bookings. So I'll say add, and I will provide grant admin consent. If you want, you can do using delegated permission also, but then there would be a different approach on how you would be able to get the token and then use the token to basically make the API calls. So okay, so now everything is set. Now what we need to do is we need to create the required body object which we need to pass, and that is where it becomes a little bit trickier. So let's basically go and understand how we can do that. Now when I was doing this, it took some trial and errors for me to basically make that work, and I was getting some sort of errors one way or another. And then that is when it tricked me that what I can do is probably first thing is I can see that whenever an appointment is being created from the booking form, what kind of values or what kind of object does it expect, what is the minimum value or minimum attributes which we need to send. And that's the reason what I generally did was I went ahead and I made an appointments call so that I would be able to get the appointments, and I manually created one test appointment for a particular staff member for a particular service on which we needed, right? And what it gave me is it created the appointments, and then I went to Graph Explorer and I created this get this object, wherein what I will do is I will use this object because this is the object which we would need to basically create a new appointment, right? But yes, having said that, we need to tweak a little bit based on the date and time and everything which we need to do. Okay, so I copied this object and I'm bringing a Visual Studio Code and I just pasted it here, right? Now let us understand, because it is very important as a developer to see what are the things which we are going to do with this, right? So if you see here, there is one appointment ID which gets created, which is okay. Then there is customer first name, customer email address, which is there. So these are the three important parameters wherein if you are doing a booking for a new customer or an older customer, we need to make sure these three fields are populated. So I'm going to keep it that way. And now if you see here, it has also written the service ID, which is required for us to pass, and the service name, it is not required. If you want, you can pass, otherwise you can ignore it. And then there are some bunch of other values which are there, which is not important for us. Then there is staff member ID. It means that while we are doing the booking, we need to make sure that we are also passing the staff member IDs against which this booking has to be done. So this is important. And then what we need to do is we need to use start date and end time. Start date time and end date time, because this is very important. So what I'm going to do is, for simplicity, I'm going to use the same month and same time, but I'll just change the date so that we will see that with 31st July are we able to make the call or not. And then there is this service location, which is not of use to us. Then there is reminders. If you don't want to set reminders or anything, you can just remove this object and pass the empty ones. And then again there is a customer object. Okay, so in my case, what I have noticed is that at the top level where you wanted to pass the customer information, we need to pass this because this is going to be used to display in the booking form for the customer information, but you should pass it here also. So in this case, what you can do is you can just pass the email address, first name, and the phone number, which is important. Other things you can just put it empty or whatever. It is not going to make any difference. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically kind of try to use the same object as it is to see whether we are able to make the API calls or not. So I'm going to copy this. I am going to come here and I'm going to paste it. Okay, so we are not making any change, we are just passing it, right? But to make sure that when you are doing your integration, that you are only passing the required request object which is there. Okay, and I'm going to show you that also in a minute. And now why do you want to do it? For example, why do you want to pass the ID, why do you want to pass the self-service appointment ID, etc., right? Because if you're going to check the request object which is required, it doesn't have that information. It starts with customer information and all of that, but it doesn't have the actual fields like, you know, self-service appointment ID and etc., because that is not required. So I'm just going to delete this and we will use the other information as it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to change the email address, at least for our purpose, so that we know that we would be able to do it, right? So I'm going to say I'm going to change the first name and the last name, and I'll delete the customer ID because I don't need it. It might be that you might be booking for a new person, and I'm going to say demo user, email ID demo user at gmail.com. Let the phone number be something, and if I come here, same thing I'm going to do here. I'm going to update the customer information, and I'm going to update the phone number, and I'm going to also say demo user. Okay, and let me save. Now let us see whatever we did will work or not. So I'm just going to go ahead and okay, we are getting fixed invalid expression on HTTP input. So why is that? Let us just check. Yes, I know why it would be, because whenever you are going to pass anything which says @ data, etc., right, it is going to give you that error. So I'm just going to delete that because we don't need it. Let's see if it has saved or there is an error again. Perfect, so it has saved, and now let's do the test run. I'll say yes, test, run the flow. Okay, the flow has run. Before that, I wanted to show you that if you go to the calendar and if we go to 27th of July, sorry, I'll say work week, we wanted to see it by week. There was already one on 29th July which was been done, right? And now if our flow has successfully run, no, it has not, it has failed. Why? It has said that there are one or more validation, the input was invalid. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, that if you are going to use exactly what they are going to tell you, you will see some errors. So now next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that a minimum input object which would be required, which we can use to pass it to an HTTP request through which we would be able to make the API call. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste one more object which is kind of a minimal object, but we are going to make some adjustment to this to basically match our thing, right? Okay, so this is the object which we tested right now. Okay, and what I need to do is I need to copy the phone numbers and customer and everything. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to change the user demo.user, that is fine. I'll change the phone number, that is fine. Then what I will do is I will service ID is important because we cannot use the older service ID, so I'm going to replace the service ID. And then the service name. Okay, and then the staff member ID, which we already discussed. So I'm just going to copy this from the old one and put it here. And then the start time and end time, right? So start time and end time, I can just copy as it is. Start time and end time. We are going to create it for 31st of July. We'll keep everything else as it is, and then we will go to, let's remove every reminder. I think it's fine, we can keep it. But what I will do is I will go to the name, email address and everything. Okay. So yeah, so this is required actually. I think that is what we misplaced. This is required where we have to pass the OData information. But then what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are just changing the demo.user at gmail.com, demo user. We don't need customer ID, so we are going to just delete that. And let's use it. I don't have any custom answer. Okay, so now what we did is we used the minimal object which was required, and now let's see. Of course we don't need ID also, but what we need is we need this type, right? So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to add type. Go to copy, come here, edit and paste, save it. Let's see if it is saving. If not, I have one idea. Yeah, I know why it is not saving. So in this case what we would have to do is wherever there is @ we will add 2 @ so that while it is saving it will keep the first one. Sorry, let's try to save this. Okay, it is still saving. Let me try to save again. Yeah, it has saved. Now let's do a run again. If we have not missed anything, I guess this time it should work. And yes, it says your flow has run successfully. So what was missing was we removed all the extra information, plus we added some OData objects which was required and everything. So flow has run successfully. We got the return response also. And now if we go to the booking, what we did is we used the booking for 31st of July. So let me just refresh the page and see. For next week, you see, of the same time, but just the date being changed, we have a new booking which got created against the booking form. So that's how we would be able to basically make an HTTP request call to Booking's GraphAPI and create an appointment booking. Hope this video was helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.